Hey guys! Tonight we begin with your life as a peasant in the Dark Ages and more. We are going to strip away the romance of castles and kings to look at the cold, muddy, and incredibly itchy reality of everyday survival. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the 10th century. Or maybe the 9th. It honestly doesn't make much difference to you because the calendar is a concept for monks and scribes. Not for someone whose entire existence is dictated by the rising and setting of the sun and the gnawing emptiness in their belly. You open your eyes, but the view doesn't change. It is pitch black. A heavy, suffocating darkness that feels less like the absence of light and more like a physical weight pressing down on your eyelids. For a moment, you panic, wondering if you've gone blind during the night, a legitimate concern in an era where an eye infection is treated with prayer and perhaps a poultice of goose dung. But then you see it. A faint, ghostly plume of white drifting in the darkness just inches from your face. It's your own breath. The air in the hut is so cold that the moisture from your lungs freezes the instant it leaves your body. You lie there, completely still, afraid to move. You know the rules of this game? Underneath the pile of rough, scratchy wool blankets and animal skins, you have managed to create a tiny, fragile pocket of body heat. It is a microscopic ecosystem of warmth that you have cultivated over the last 6 hours of fitful sleep. To move a limb, to shift your hip, to even turn your head too quickly, is to break the seal. It invites the frozen air of the room to rush in and shatter the only comfort you are going to feel for the next 16 hours. So you stay frozen. You listen. The hut is silent, but not quiet. The silence of the Dark Ages is heavy with texture. There is the rhythmic, wheezing sound of your father snoring a few feet away. There is the rustle of straw as your younger sister rolls over, searching for a warmth that isn't there. And then, there is the other sound, a low, guttural snorting, followed by the shifting of a heavy hoof on packed earth. That is the cow. Yes, the cow is in the room with you. You might think this is strange, perhaps even disgusting, to sleep a few feet away from a 1,000-pound farm animal that defecates where it stands. But right now, lying in the freezing dark, you don't feel disgust, you feel envy. That cow is a massive living radiator. In fact, the only reason you haven't frozen to death in this wattle-and-daub icebox is because the livestock are breathing their hot, damp air into the same enclosed space. You take a breath in through your nose, and you immediately regret it. The air is stagnant. It has a physical taste. It tastes of old wood smoke, unwashed bodies, wet dog, and manure. You see, your house doesn't really have a chimney. Not a proper one. You have a hole in the roof, a small gap in the thatch that is supposed to let the smoke out. But smoke is lazy, and the cold air outside acts like a plug. So, the smoke from last night's fire has just been hovering in the rafters all night, sinking lower and lower as it cools, filling the room with an acrid, hanging fog. Your lungs feel coated in it. You cough, a harsh hacking sound that rattles in your chest, and you feel the familiar sting of soot in your throat. This is the smoker's cough of the medieval era, except you've never smoked a cigarette in your life. You've just spent every night of your existence sleeping inside a chimney. You try to go back to sleep. You squeeze your eyes shut and try to drift away, but the cold is relentless. It is an active, predatory force. It creeps up through the floor. Let's talk about the floor. It is dirt. Just packed earth. Over the years, thousands of footsteps yours. Your family's. The cows have compacted it into a surface almost as hard as stone. In the summer, it's dusty. In the rain, it's muddy. But now, in the depths of winter, it is a block of ice. You are sleeping on a mattress, if you can call it that, which consists of a burlap sack stuffed with straw. The straw is old. It has been broken down into a fine dust that offers almost no cushioning against the frozen ground beneath. Your hip bone aches where it presses against the earth. Your shoulder is stiff. Every joint in your body feels like it has rusted overnight. You are 25 years old, but in the damp, unforgiving climate of your village, you feel 50. The dampness has settled into your marrow. You shift your legs, trying to pull your knees up to your chest to conserve heat, and the wool blanket scratches against your skin. This isn't the soft, merino wool you might buy at a high-end store today. This is rough, untreated wool, still rich with lanolin and grease, woven tightly to repel water, but designed with absolutely no regard for comfort. It itches. It always itches. But the itch is preferable to the frostbite. So you pull it up over your nose, creating a tent of stale air to breathe. As you lie there, you become aware of the life teeming around you. And I don't mean your family. The straw mattress beneath you is a metropolis of fleas. They have been dormant for a few hours, sluggish from the cold, but as your body heat has warmed the straw, they have awoken. You feel a sharp, sudden prick on your ankle, then another on your side. You don't even reach down to scratch it. You are too tired, and moving your hand would let the cold in. You just accept it. The fleas are as much a part of your life as the sun and the rain. You are their ecosystem. The darkness is slowly shifting. It's not becoming light and exactly, but the absolute black is fading into a bruised, charcoal gray. The sun is thinking about rising, somewhere far away, beyond the dense forests that surround your village. You look up at the ceiling. Your eyes have adjusted enough to make out the shape of the roof. It slopes steeply, meeting at a ridgepole that is black with decades of soot. Hanging from the thatch are long, shiny stalactites of glossy black tar hardened soot that looks like obsidian teeth waiting to drop. Up there, in the thatch, you hear the scuttling of rats. They are settling down for the day, their nocturnal shift ending just as your daily grind is about to begin. You dread the moment you have to stand up. You know exactly what it will feel like. The air outside the blanket is hovering just above freezing. You will have to throw off the wool, exposing your skin to the bite of the air. You will have to stand on the frozen dirt floor with bare feet or thin, hole-ridden stockings. You will have to fumble in the dark to find your tunic, which will be damp and cold to the touch. There is no snooze button. There is no calling in sick. If you don't get up, the fire goes out completely. If the fire goes out, the pot doesn't boil. If the pot doesn't boil, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you don't have the energy to work the fields. And if you don't work the fields, you starve. The logic is brutal, simple, and circular. The rooster crows. It's a harsh, piercing shriek that cuts through the thick walls of the hut. It's not a cheerful greeting, it's a command. Beside you, your father groans and sits up, the straw crunching loudly. The seal of warmth is broken. A draft of icy air sweeps across your back, raising goosebumps instantly. The collective body heat of the family dissipates in seconds. Sucked away by the drafty walls, you sit up. The blood rushes from your head, making you dizzy for a moment. You rub your face with hands that are calloused and cracked, the dirt permanently ingrained in the fingerprints. Your stomach lets out a loud, hollow growl, a painful twisting sensation that bends you forward. It has been 12 hours since your last meal. A watery bowl of pottage that was mostly cabbage and hope. The hunger is sharp, acidic, and demanding. It drives you to your feet. You stand up, your knees popping, your breath clouding around your head like a personal fog bank. You step onto the frozen floor, the shock of the cold sending a jolt of adrenaline up your spine that wakes you up faster than any caffeine ever could. You stumble toward the center of the room, toward the hearth. The fire is just a pile of gray ash, but deep down, there's a faint orange glow. A single ember, holding on for dear life. You need to feed it. You need to nurse it back to health. But more importantly, you need to put something in your stomach to stop the cramping. You look toward the corner where the food is kept, hoping, praying, that the rats didn't get into the grain sack during the night. It is time for breakfast. You shuffle across the uneven, packed earth floor, your bare feet finding the familiar grooves and ridges in the dirt that serve as the topography of your small world. It is pitch black, save for the faint, dying orange glow of the embers in the central hearth. A weak light that offers no warmth, only a reminder of the fire that needs tending. But first, the hunger. It is a dull, hollow ache that sits just beneath your ribs. A persistent companion that wakes up with you every morning. You reach the wooden chest in the corner. A heavy, rough-hewn box that serves as the pantry, the safe, and the most valuable furniture you own. The lid creaks a sharp, wooden groan in the silence of the hut, and you reach inside. Your fingers brush against the rough canvas of a grain sack, checking for holes, checking for the slick fur of a rat, but finding only the coarse weave of the fabric. Safe. At least for tonight. Beside the sack lies your prize, the loaf. You pull it out, and it feels less like food and more like a tool. Something you could use to hammer a nail or chalk a wheel. It is a round, dense disc of black bread, baked perhaps 3 or 4 days ago. Fresh bread is a luxury of the feast days, or a privilege for the master in the manor house on the hill. For you, bread is a project. It is an endurance test. You take your seat on a low, 3-legged stool near the hearth, the wood wobbling slightly on the dirt. You hold the bread in your hands, feeling its weight. It is heavy, dense as a stone, and cold. In the gloom, you can't see the color, but you know it well. It is dark brown, bordering on gray, a mixture of rye, barley, and whatever else the miller swept off the floor. They call it maslin bread, the fodder of the field worker. You bring the crust to your lips. There is no aroma of yeast or warm butter here. It smells of the earth. It smells of the smoke that hangs permanently in the thatch of your roof. It smells faintly of damp wool and old straw. You take a bite. Or rather, you attempt to. The crust fights back. It is calcified, a thick armor protecting the dense crumb inside. You have to turn your head to the side, using your molars to gain purchase, gnawing at the edge like a dog with a bone. A shard of crust snaps off with a sound that seems impossibly loud in the quiet hut. A dry crack that reverberates in your skull. As you begin to chew, the reality of your daily sustenance makes itself known. It is dry, incredibly, aggressively dry. It sucks the moisture from your tongue and the roof of your mouth, turning into a thick, gluey paste that requires genuine physical effort to work through. You chew, and you chew, and you chew, and then there is the grit. This is the secret ingredient of the Dark Ages, the one the history books tend to gloss over. You feel it instantly, the unmistakable crunch of sand and stone dust between your teeth. The millstones that ground your flour were carved from sandstone or basalt, and as they ground the grain, they ground themselves down, too. Every loaf of bread you will ever eat in your life contains a fine powder of rock. You can feel the grit sliding against your enamel. You are acutely aware that with every breakfast, you are slowly sanding your own teeth down to nubs. You've seen the elders in the village, their smiles revealing gums and worn-down stumps. And you know that this bread, the thing keeping you alive, is also the thing destroying you. But you keep chewing. You have no choice. The taste is complex, if you care to analyze it, though mostly you just try to swallow. It is sour. The sourdough starter used to raise this dense brick was likely old and vinegary. There is a bitterness from the rye, an earthiness from the barley, and occasionally, the sharp, unexpected tang of a weed seed that got mixed in with the harvest cockle or darnel that slipped past the winnowing. You sit in the semi-darkness, your jaw working rhythmically, a slow, repetitive motion that is almost hypnotic. Around you, the hut is waking up. You hear the rustle of straw as your children shift in their sleep on the shared pallet. You hear the heavy, rhythmic breathing of the ox on the other side of the thin partition, the smell of its manure mixing with the smell of your breakfast. There is no water to wash this down. The water in the bucket by the door has a film of ice on it. And besides, drinking plain water is a gamble you usually prefer not to take unless you've boiled it for broth. So, you rely on your own saliva to soften the stone in your mouth. You break off another piece. This one is mostly soft crumb, or what passes for soft. It is clammy and cool. It sits heavy in your hand. You realize that you aren't eating for pleasure. You are fueling a machine. Your body is the engine that will pull the plow and swing the scythe. And this dense, sour, sandy lump of dough is the coal. It lands in your stomach with a thud, a heavy weight that you will feel for hours. It's a strange sensation, being full but not satisfied. The bread expands in your gut, a solid mass that stops the hunger pangs but leaves you feeling weighed down. Lethargic, you run your tongue over your teeth, clearing away the paste and the grit, checking instinctively for chips or cracks. Everything seems intact. You look down at the remaining hunk of bread in your hand. You've eaten perhaps a quarter of it. The rest you will wrap in a scrap of linen and shove into your tunic for later. Lunch will be the same as breakfast, just eaten standing up in a muddy field, perhaps softened by a splash of weak ale if the bailiff is feeling generous. The gloom in the hut is lifting, just barely. The utter blackness is turning to a bruised, dark gray. Through the cracks in the wooden shutter, you can see the first hint of the world outside a world that is cold, wet, and waiting for you. You swallow the last mouthful, the sour taste lingering on the back of your tongue. The act of eating has warmed you slightly, the digestion process starting its slow burn, but the air in the hut is still freezing. You shiver, the involuntary tremor running from your shoulders down to your spine. The brief respite of the meal is over. The heavy bread sits in your belly like an anchor, mooring you to the reality of the morning. You wipe the crumbs from your lips with the back of a dirty hand. Your skin feels rough, dry, and cold to the touch. The simple act of sitting still has allowed the chill to creep back into your bones, settling into your joints. You need to move. You need to cover yourself. You look toward the pile of clothing on the floor, barely distinguishable from the rags used for bedding. It's time to build your shell against the elements. You dread this part almost as much as the waking. The bread has given you the energy to stand, but it hasn't given you the will. You stand up, your knees popping in the silence, and turn toward the heap of shapeless, scratchy garments that will be your second skin for the next 16 hours. The pile of clothing waiting for you on the rough-hewn bench looks less like apparel and more like a gray, dormant beast curled up against the cold. In the dim light filtering through the cracks in the thatch, you can barely distinguish the individual garments. It is just a mass of shadow and texture, a heavy, shapeless mound that promises warmth only at the price of relentless, grinding discomfort. You reach out, your fingers stiff and clumsy from the morning chill, and grasp the first layer. It is your linen shirt, or at least what passes for linen in this time and place. It is not the soft, breezy fabric you might imagine fluttering on a clothesline in a detergent commercial. This is coarse, unbleached flax, stiff with the accumulated sweat of the last fortnight and hardened by the damp air of the hut. You likely slept in it stripping naked in this temperature is a fool's game, but if you did manage to peel it off the night before, putting it back on now is a specific kind of torture. The fabric is violently cold. It feels damp to the touch, possessing a clammy heaviness that makes your skin crawl as you pull it over your head. It settles against your chest and back like a sheet of ice, stealing what little body heat you had managed to hoard under your blanket. But the linen is the luxury item. The linen is the mercy. Next comes the wool. You reach for your tunic. It is heavy, woven thick and tight to turn away the wind, but it possesses the texture of a rusted scouring pad. As you pull it on, the smell hits you before the scratch does. It is the smell of wet sheep, of animal grease, deeply embedded in the fibers. This wool has not been stripped of its natural lanolin. In the modern world, lanolin is a refined ingredient in expensive lotions. Here, it is a gummy, waterproof, waxy substance that coats every thread of your clothing. It turns the tunic into a trap for dirt and smoke. The garment smells of the wood fire that burned last night, and the night before that, and every night for the last 3 years. It smells of old labor. It smells of the mud you knelt in yesterday. You slide your arms through the sleeves, and the friction begins. The wool grabs at your skin. It doesn't glide, it abrades. Even with the linen shirt underneath, the wool finds the sensitive spots: your wrists, the back of your neck, the hollow of your throat. It is a constant, low-level irritation. A prickly heat that starts the moment you get dressed and does not cease until you fall asleep. You might think that after a lifetime of wearing this, your skin would toughen, that you would become immune to the itch. But the body never truly forgives the assault of rough-spun wool. You just learn to ignore the signal, pushing the sensation to the back of your mind, where it sits as a dull, buzzing annoyance. As you tug the hem of the tunic down to your knees, you feel a distinct, isolated movement near your collarbone. A tiny, faint tickle. You freeze for a second. You know exactly what it is. It is a louse, or perhaps a flea. In truth, your clothing is an ecosystem unto itself. You share this tunic with a colony of passengers that have made their home in the thick, warm seams of the fabric. They are the unseen companions of the peasantry. You are never truly alone in the Dark Ages, because you are a host. You could try to hunt them down, picking through the seams by the light of a tallow candle, popping them between your thumbnails, a common pastime in the evening. But in the morning darkness, there is no point. You simply shift your shoulders, grinding the fabric against your skin in a futile attempt to dislodge the visitor, and carry on. You move to your legs. There are no trousers here, not as you know them. You reach for your hose 2 separate legs of cloth, like long, disjointed stockings made of thick, unyielding wool. You have to pull them up one by one, hopping on the dirt floor, your bare feet recoiling from the cold earth. The wool bunches behind your knees. It sags. You have to thread a cord through the top of each stocking and tie it to the belt of your braise, your linen undershorts. This system of suspension is fiddly and imperfect. As you work the knots with your numb fingers, you know that at some point today, a knot will slip, and you will have to stop in the middle of a muddy field to re-tie your own leg. The gap between your hose and your braise leaves a drafty vulnerability at the top of your thighs, a reminder that medieval clothing is often a collection of parts rather than a cohesive whole. You bind your legs with strips of cloth or leather garters to keep the wool from flapping, winding them tight enough to leave marks but not so tight as to cut off the blood. Finally, you reach for the outer layer, a hood, perhaps attached to a short cape or a separate cowl. This is your primary defense against the world. You pull it over your head, the rough wool settling around your face, narrowing your field of vision. The hood traps your own breath, creating a small, humid microclimate around your nose and mouth. It smells of your own unbrushed teeth and the stale ale you drank yesterday, mixing with the pervasive scent of wood smoke and damp wool. You stand there for a moment, fully encased. You feel heavier now. The clothing adds pounds to your frame, a drag on your movements. You are wrapped in the colors of the earth, dull browns, faded russets, grays that look like storm clouds. There are no bright crimsons or deep blues here. Those are the colors of wealth, created with expensive dyes imported from distant lands. Your clothes are the color of the sheep they came from, or dyed with cheap roots and nuts found in the nearby forest walnut shells. Matter. Woad. They are camouflage for a life lived in the dirt. And they are damp. They are almost always damp. The concept of bone dry is a rarity in your life. The air in the hut is moist, the ground is wet, and the wool absorbs it all like a sponge. The clothing feels heavy on your shoulders, a sodden weight that clings to you. You run a hand over the front of your tunic. It feels greasy and rough. You haven't washed this garment in months. Washing wool is a massive, labor-intensive undertaking involving buckets of water, heating stones, and possibly stale urine to bleach out stains, a process so arduous that it is reserved for only the direst necessity. Instead, you wear the dirt. You wear the spills of yesterday's pottage. You wear the sweat of last week's plowing. The layers you have just put on are not merely covering your body. They are a historical record of your hardship. The itch at your neck returns. Sharper this time. You slide a finger under the wool collar and scratch aggressively, leaving a red welt on your unwashed skin. The relief is temporary, fleeting. The itch will return. It always does. You take a breath, inhaling the dust that rose from the clothes as you moved them. You are armored now. You are insulated against the biting wind, if not the damp. You are protected from the sun, though not the lice. You are wrapped in the uniform of your station. A drab, scratchy, smelly cocoon that marks you instantly as one who works the land. The cold of the hut seems slightly less penetrating now, kept at bay by the layers of animal hair matted against your skin. You are as ready as you will ever be. The silence of the hut is oppressive, and the day is wasting. You look toward the door, where the faint gray light of pre-dawn is trying to push through the cracks. You can hear the animals shifting on the other side of the low partition wall, the soft snorts and stomps of beasts waiting to be tended. You have wrapped yourself in wool, but now you must deal with the creatures that provided it. The air in the hut is thick, but the air near the floor where you must go next is thicker still. You turn away from the empty warmth of your sleeping spot and step toward the smell of ammonia and wet straw. The smell hits you not as a surprise, but as a heavy, familiar blanket that you have worn every morning of your life. It is the sharp, stinging scent of ammonia, mixed with the damp, earthy rot of wet straw and the musk of large, warm bodies. You do not recoil from it. You cannot afford the energy to be disgusted by your own home. In the pitch black of the pre-dawn hour, your eyes are useless. So you navigate by this smell, letting the intensity of the stench guide you toward the lower end of the hut. You take a step, and the ground beneath your feet changes. You have left the hard-packed earth of the living area, the place where you and your family huddle for warmth, and stepped down the slight incline into the byre. This is the reality of the longhouse. There are no separate barns here, no distant stables where the livestock live out of sight and out of mind. Here, the division between human and beast is nothing more than a shallow drainage ditch cut into the floor and perhaps a flimsy wooden hurdle that barely reaches your waist. You reach out into the darkness, your hand brushing against the rough, peeling bark of a support post, feeling your way toward the tools. Your fingers find the handle of the shovel. It is not a refined tool, it is a crude thing, a piece of wood shaped with an adze, the edge tipped perhaps with a thin strip of iron, though more likely it is just fire-hardened oak, worn smooth and dark by the oils of your hands and the hands of your father before you. It feels heavy and cold, a dead weight that pulls at your stiff shoulders. A low, rumbling sound vibrates through the air, followed by a rush of warm, moist breath against your cheek. The ox is awake. You can hear the rhythmic grinding of its jaw, the shifting of its immense weight on the sodden bedding. It is a massive, dangerous creature to share a bedroom with, a beast of burden that could crush your foot with a careless step. Yet you feel a strange sort of gratitude toward it. In the depth of winter, when the frost creates intricate patterns on the inside of the thatched roof, this animal is a living furnace. Its body heat, radiating into the stagnant air, is likely the only reason you didn't freeze to death in your sleep. But that warmth comes with a price, and that price lies in the slurry at your feet. You grip the shovel, your knuckles white even in the dark, and you begin the work. It is a repetitive, mindless labor, a ritual of scraping and lifting that requires no thought, only a dull, aching endurance. You thrust the blade into the bedding. It squelches, a wet, sucking sound that seems loud in the quiet hut. The straw is heavy, sodden with urine and weighted down with manure. You lift the load, the muscles in your lower back protesting with a sharp, familiar twinge, and you turn to deposit it into the wicker basket waiting by the door. Scrape, lift, turn, dump. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. In the dark, you are intimate with the filth. You know the texture of the floor by the way the shovel drags across it. You know the specific, heavy reek of the pig that sleeps in the corner, distinct from the grassy, fermented smell of the cow dung. You are clearing away the night's accumulation, mucking out the byproduct of your own heating system. It is a strange thing, if you stop to think about it, which you rarely do, because thinking burns calories you can't spare. But consider the architecture of your life. You might imagine that keeping animals inside is a sign of poverty, a lack of space, and you would be right, to a degree. But it is also a deliberate design. This is security. A cow is the most valuable thing you will ever own. It is your tractor, your milk source, your leather, your wealth. To leave it outside in a separate building is to invite theft, or wolves, or the freezing death of a bad winter. So, you bring the barn inside. You sleep to the sound of chewing cud and the smell of digestion. You are the guardian of the beast, and the beast is the guardian of your warmth. You pause for a moment, leaning on the shovel, listening to the wheeze of your own breath. The air down here is thick, almost soupy. It tastes of dust and methane. You wipe your forehead with the back of your itchy wool sleeve, smearing soot and sweat across your brow. There is a misconception, perhaps in the minds of those who have never lived this life, that the Dark Ages were a time of knights and stone castles and grand adventures. But this, right here, standing ankle-deep in animal waste before the sun has even thought about rising. This is the true texture of history. It is not the clash of swords, it is the scrape of a wooden shovel against a dirt floor. It is the unending battle against entropy and filth. You resume the work. The basket is nearly full. The mixture of straw and manure is heavy, a dense, wet mass that steams in the cold air. This, too, is valuable. Nothing is wasted in your world. This foul sludge is gold for the fields. It is the nitrogen that will coax the barley from the reluctant earth later in the spring. You are not just cleaning, you are harvesting the fertility of the farm. You are moving the future harvest from the floor of your house to the midden heap outside. With a grunt of effort, you hoist the wicker basket. It rests against your hip, damp and reeking, seeping slightly onto your tunic. You move toward the door of the hut, navigating the uneven floor with the practiced shuffle of the exhausted. You unlatch the heavy wooden door, and it swings open with a groan of leather hinges. The transition is shocking. You step out from the humid, suffocating atmosphere of the hut into the biting clarity of the morning. The air outside is crisp, freezing, and shockingly fresh, though it carries the scent of wood smoke from a dozen other huts waking up around you. The cold slaps your face, tightening your skin, instantly drying the sweat on your forehead. You walk the few paces to the midden heap, the designated pile of waste that sits like a monument to daily life just a few yards from your front door. You tip the basket, shaking out the clotted straw and dung. It lands with a heavy, wet thud atop the pile. Steam rises from the heap, curling up into the gray, pre-dawn sky, ghost-like wisps of heat escaping into the void. For a second, you just stand there, the empty basket hanging from your hand. You look at the horizon. The sky is beginning to bruise with a dull purple light, the first hint that the night is losing its grip. The silence of the village is breaking. A rooster crows, a ragged, harsh sound that echoes off the thatch. A dog barks in the distance. The heavy wooden door of a neighbor's hut creaks open. You turn back toward your own door, but you do not go back inside to the warmth. There is no time for that. The animals are clean, or as clean as they will get. But now, the real work begins. Your hands are stiff with cold, yet sticky with the residue of the stable. You wipe them on your tunic, a feudal gesture that only spreads the dirt. You look down at your boots. They are wrapped in leather, tied with thongs of hide, but they are old. The leather is cracked, and the soles are thin. You can feel the cold of the ground seeping through them. As you step away from the midden, your foot lands not on solid earth, but sinks slightly. The path leading away from your hut is not paved. It is not gravel. It is a mixture of earth, rain, and the overflow of the daily life you just mucked out. You take a breath of the icy air, filling your lungs, trying to clear the taste of ammonia from the back of your throat. It doesn't work. The taste is part of you now. You grip the empty basket, place it by the door, and turn your face toward the village path. The mud awaits. You step across the threshold, leaving the stale, ammonia-heavy air of the animal pen for the sharp, biting chill of the morning proper. You might expect a breath of fresh air, a moment of relief as you leave the confined space of the hut. But the air outside isn't fresh. It is heavy with dampness, a thick gray mist that clings to the thatch of the roofs and obscures the trees at the edge of the village. It tastes of wet wood ash and the decomposition of 1,000 damp autumns. You set the basket down your chore with the manure is finished, but the day has barely begun. You turn your gaze toward the path that snakes through the cluster of huts, the artery of the village that leads out to the open fields. It is generous to call it a path. In your time, there are no cobblestones here, no drainage ditches, no gravel packed down to form a solid surface. There is only the earth, and the earth has been churned. You look down at your feet. You are wearing turnshoe simple leather boots constructed inside out and then turned right side out. A clever bit of medieval engineering that unfortunately results in a sole that is pitifully thin. They are soft, pliable, and about as water-resistant as a linen napkin. You take your first step away from the relative dryness of the hut's overhang. Immediately, you feel the ground yield. It doesn't support you, it accepts you. Your foot sinks 2 inches, then 3, into a substance that is not quite soil and not quite water. It is a slurry, A freezing, viscous pudding of mud. This is the reality of medieval travel, even if that travel is just 100 yards to the edge of the village. The ground is a record of everything that has happened in the last month. It holds the relentless autumn rains that have turned the clay soil into a brown glue. It holds the excrement of the village livestock, the pigs that root around freely, the geese that hiss and snap, the oxen that were driven through here yesterday evening. It holds the slops thrown from unshuttered windows, the vegetable peelings, the wood shavings. It is a churned up, fermented paste of life and waste, and it is cold. That is the first sensation that truly registers, overriding the smell. The cold attacks your feet instantly. The leather of your boots, already worn smooth and thin from seasons of use, offers no insulation. You feel the icy moisture seep through the stitching almost immediately. It's a creeping sensation, a dark stain of cold that spreads from the sole of your foot, wrapping around your heel, soaking into the rough wool of your hose. You take another step, squelch. The sound is wet and heavy, a suction noise as the mud tries to keep your boot. You have to engage your calves, pulling your foot up with a deliberate, heavy effort, fighting the grip of the earth. Then you plant it down again. Splash. A spray of brown droplets coats the hem of your tunic. You don't even look down to check. Your tunic is already stiff with dried mud from yesterday. And the day before, it is simply a uniform of grime. You keep your head down, watching the path. You have to look up. To admire the sunrise, if there even was one behind that wall of gray fog, would be to risk a twisted ankle. The mud hides hazards. There are deep ruts carved by the wheels of the Lord's cart, now filled with opaque, stagnant water. There are sharp stones, half buried and waiting to bruise your arch through the thin leather. There are slippery patches of clay where a moment's inattention will send you sprawling onto your back, coating you from neck to heel in the freezing sludge. So you walk with the peasant's gait, knees slightly bent, center of gravity low, eyes scanning the ground 3 feet ahead. It is a trudge, a rhythmic, energy-sapping march. You are not alone in this. Around you, shapes emerge from the mist, other villagers, your neighbors, emerging from their own dark huts. They move like ghosts, silent and hunched. There are no cheery morning's greetings here. No one waves. To speak is to waste breath, and to open your mouth is to invite the freezing mist into your lungs. You simply nod, a barely perceptible dip of the chin, acknowledging that they, too, are awake, and they, too, are miserable. You pass the blacksmith's hut. You can smell the charcoal dust mixing with the damp earth, a metallic tang in the air. The ground here is darker, stained black with soot, turning the mud into an oily, black paste. You step carefully over a puddle that looks deep enough to swallow your foot entirely. You might have heard stories of the great Roman roads, those straight, stone-paved highways that sliced across the world centuries ago. They say they are still there, somewhere, buried under the grass or broken apart to build church walls. But here, the road is alive. It moves. It changes texture with every yard. In summer, this path is hard as iron, a dusty and rutted track that twists your ankles and chokes you with grit. In winter, it is a frozen topography of jagged ridges where the mud has solidified into ice, sharp enough to cut leather. But now, in the shoulder season, it is the worst of both. It is the mud. You can feel the dampness climbing your legs now. The wool of your stockings acts like a wick, drawing the freezing water up from your sodden boots. Your toes are beginning to numb, a dull ache replacing the sharp sting of the initial cold. You try to wiggle them as you walk, but the leather is tight, shrunken by the constant cycle of wetting and drying. The suction of the ground seems to get stronger the further you get from the huts. The path widens as it approaches the edge of the village, but the traffic here is heavier, and the mud is deeper. The cattle were driven this way to the common pasture, and their heavy hooves have pockmarked the earth into a cratered moonscape of sludge. You navigate a ridge of relatively firm ground between two wagon ruts. It requires a delicate balance. Your arms slightly out to your sides. For a moment, you slide your left foot skids on a slick of wet clay, and your heart jumps in your chest. A spike of adrenaline. You catch yourself, digging your heels in, muscles tensed. You exhale a plume of white vapor. You didn't fall. A small victory. If you fell, you would be wet to the skin for the next 14 hours. There are no changes of clothes waiting for you. There is no drying room. There is only the body heat you can generate by working. You reach the edge of the village. The huts fall away behind you, their thatched silhouettes disappearing into the fog. The smell of wood smoke and concentrated humanity fades, replaced by the smell of wet grass and raw, turned earth. The path dissolves altogether here, spreading out into the open boundary of the fields. The wind picks up, no longer blocked by the structures of the village. It cuts through your tunic, finding the gaps in your wool, chilling the sweat that is already forming on your back from the exertion of the walk. You stop for a brief second to scrape a heavy clump of clay from your heel against a stone. It falls with a heavy plop, but it makes little difference. The mud is relentless. It is part of the landscape, part of your clothes, part of you. A head, looming out of the mist like a torture device. You see the shape of the plow. It sits waiting in the furrow where you left it yesterday. It is wooden, heavy, and silent. The field stretches out beyond it, a vast gray expanse of heavy soil that needs to be turned. The walk is over. The work is about to begin. You take a breath, tasting the moisture, and step off the path, your boots sinking deep into the waiting field. The mud of the road was just the prologue. The mud of the field is the story. The mud of the field is the story, and it is a long, repetitive, tedious story that you have read 1,000 times before. You stand there for a moment, letting the heaviness of the situation settle into your bones, just as your boots settle into the clay. Before you lies the strip your strip, or at least the strip assigned to you by the village council this season. It is a long, narrow ribbon of earth, perhaps a furlong in length, stretching away into the gray mist. It looks less like a place to grow food and more like a wound in the landscape, a chaotic mess of weeds, stubble from last year's harvest, and stones that seem to breed in the dark of winter. Beside you waits the plow. It is a monstrous thing. Really, if you have a romanticized image in your head of a light, cheerful tool that you casually push through soft loam while whistling a tune, you need to banish that thought immediately. This is the heavy moldboard plow, the engine of the medieval agricultural revolution. And it is a beast. It is a massive, clunky framework of rough-hewn ash and oak, iron shot if you're lucky, but mostly just heavy, damp wood. It sits in the mud like a dead weight, looking sullen and immovable. You walk to the front of the contraption to hitch up the team. You don't own a team of oxen yourself. Hardly anyone does. You own perhaps one ox, or maybe just a share in one. So the team standing before you is a mismatched, grumpy committee of livestock pooled together from your neighbors. There are 4 of them today. Great hulking shapes with matted fur and steaming nostrils. They smell of wet hair, ancient dirt, and the sweet, fermenting scent of chewed cud. They look at you with large, liquid eyes that convey a profound lack of enthusiasm for the task ahead. You can't blame them. You check the yoke, running your hands over the smooth, worn wood that locks them together. The leather straps are stiff with cold and grease, biting into your fingers as you tighten them. The oxen shift their weight, their hooves making wet. Sucking sounds in the mire. You can feel the heat radiating from their massive bodies, a stark contrast to the biting wind that whips around your ankles. You give the lead ox a pat on the flank, not out of affection. Really. But just to let him know you are there, and that the misery is about to begin. You move back to the plow handles. They are polished smooth by years of sweat and friction, yet they still manage to feel hostile. You grip them, and your hands instantly protest. Your palms are already a map of past labor's calluses, layered over scars, layered over fresh blisters, but the cold makes the wood feel hard as stone. You settle your feet, trying to find purchase in the slime, and shout the command to move. Ha! For a second, nothing happens. The oxen just chew. You shout again, louder, perhaps tapping the flank of the nearest beast with a long hazel switch. Slowly, with an agonizing groan of protest, the team leans forward. The chains go taut with a sharp clank, and the plow lurches. Plow. This is the moment the real violence begins. The plow does not glide, it tears. The vertical cutter, the coulter, slices down into the sod, severing the roots of the grass. Behind it, the share the iron tip gouges horizontal under the earth. And then comes the mold board, the curved wooden flank of the plow that forces the slice of earth up and over, turning it upside down. The vibration hits you instantly. It travels up through the wooden frame, through the handles, and straight into your wrists and elbows. It is a shuddering, jarring sensation, as if the earth itself is fighting back, kicking against the intrusion. You aren't just steering this thing, you are wrestling it. You have to lean your entire body weight into the turn to keep the furrow straight, fighting the plow's natural desire to bounce off a rock or slide sideways into the muck. Every step is a battle. Your boots are heavy with accumulated clay, adding pounds to each footfall. You slip, you slide, you recover, and you push. The oxen plod on, indifferent to your struggle, their pace maddeningly slow yet impossible to speed up. If they go too fast, the plow skips. If they go too slow, it bogs down. So you exist in this purgatory of slow-motion exertion. The smell of the earth being turned is overpowering. It's a raw, damp scent, the smell of decay and life mixed together. It's the smell of wet worms, of crushed roots, of cold flint. In the summer, this smell might be pleasant, promising growth. Here, in the gray light of early morning, it just smells like a grave. And then, crush! The plow hits a stone. The handles jerk violently in your grip. A sudden, bone-rattling stop that snaps your teeth together and sends a jolt of white-hot pain shooting up your forearms. This is the reality of the field. It is not soft soil, it is a glacial dumping ground of rocks. You shout at the oxen to halt, though they are usually happy to oblige, and you have to drag the plow back a few inches. Wrestle the heavy frame sideways, and dig the stone out with your hands. You reach down into the furrow. The mud is freezing, seizing your fingers with an icy grip. You pry the rock loose, it's jagged, covered in slime, about the size of a human skull, and hurl it onto the pile of other rocks at the edge of the strip. This is the field clearing that never ends. Every year, the frost heaves new stones to the surface. Every year, you break your back removing them. It is a Sisyphean task, performed in the mud. You wipe your muddy hands on your wool tunic, it's already filthy. So it doesn't matter, and grab the handles again. The blisters on your palms are throbbing now. One of them, right at the base of your thumb, feels like it is torn open. A sharp, stinging fire that flares every time you apply pressure. But you cannot stop. The village operates on a schedule. If you don't plow your strip today, you delay the sowing. If you delay the sowing, you miss the harvest. If you miss the harvest, you starve. The logic is simple and brutal. So, you push. You fall into a trance of discomfort. The world narrows down to the patch of ground immediately in front of the plowshare. You watch the earth curl over, a black wave of soil frozen in slow motion. You watch the rhythmic swaying of the oxen's hindquarters. You watch the steam rise from their backs and mix with the fog. There is a strange, hypnotic quality to the misery. Your mind starts to detach from your body to escape the ache in your lower back. You start thinking about the ridge and furrow system you are creating. You aren't just flattening the land, you are sculpting it. By plowing the same strip toward the center year after year, you are piling the dirt up in the middle, creating a high ridge for the crops and a low furrow for drainage. It's a clever system, really, a way to keep the wheat dry in this sodden climate. But right now, standing in the ankle-deep water of the furrow, it feels less like engineering and more like you are digging a ditch to stand in. Your breath rasps in your chest. The cold air burns your lungs, and your nose is running constantly, dripping unnoticed. You are thirsty, a dry, scratchy thirst that coats the back of your throat, but the idea of stopping to drink from the water skin feels like too much effort. It would break the rhythm. It's better to just keep moving, to keep the blood pumping. Because if you stop, the sweat trapped against your skin by the wool will turn to ice. You reach the end of the furlong, the furrow long, the distance the oxen can pull before they need to rest. You haul on the handles, shouting at the beast to turn. This is the hardest part. You have to leverage the massive weight of the plow around in a tight semicircle. The wood creaking and groaning, the oxen stepping on each other's hooves, the mud churning into a thick, impassable slurry. You slip, falling to one knee, the wet cold instantly soaking through your leggings. You don't curse. You don't have the energy for it. You just grunt, pull yourself up using the plow handle, and align the share for the return trip. You look up for a brief moment, scanning the horizon. The sun is trying to break through the clouds, a pale, watery disk that offers no warmth, only a slightly brighter shade of gray. Other figures are moving in the distance, other peasants wrestling their own wooden beasts, silent specters in the mist. You are all alone together, united by the mud and the labor. You grip the wood again. The raw skin on your hand burns. You lean forward. You shout. The oxen lurch. The vibration starts again. You are about halfway back up the strip, lost in the mindless repetition of step-push-step, when a sound cuts through the heavy breathing of the cattle. It is the rhythmic thud of hooves, not the slow squelch of oxen, but the purposeful trot of a horse. The sound triggers a primal instinct in you. It is the sound of authority, the sound of trouble. You don't stop plowing to stop would be seen as laziness, but you hunch your shoulders instinctively, making yourself smaller. You keep your eyes fixed on the turning earth, but your ears are tuned to the path that runs alongside the field. The horse draws closer, the jingle of a bridle clearly audible over the wind. You know who it is before you even look. You can feel the weight of his gaze pressing against the back of your neck. Heavier than the plow, colder than the wind. It's the one man in the village whose hands are not blistered by the plow, but who holds the power to empty your larder. The rider slows his horse, watching you struggle with the unforgiving earth, and a shadow falls across your furrow. The shadow stretches long and distorted over the uneven furrows of the field, a jagged silhouette of beast and rider that seems to swallow the little progress you have made this morning. You do not straighten your back. You do not wipe the sweat that is currently stinging your eyes, mixing with the grit of the soil to form a paste on your brow. You know better than to look up. To look up is to invite notice. And in your world, notice is a dangerous currency. The horse snorts, a wet, rattling sound that sprays a fine mist into the cold air. You can hear the shifting of weight, the heavy creak of well-oiled leather saddle straps straining against the animal's flank. It is a sound of wealth. Your own leather. The scraps that bind your boots to your feet, cracked and hardened years ago, offering no such supple groan. They merely squelch in the mud. The rider above you settles. The jingling of metal, perhaps a bridle. Perhaps a coin purse cutting through the repetitive drone of the wind in the bare trees. This is the bailiff. You know this not because you see his face, but because the very air seems to thicken with the pressure of assessment. He is the Lord's eyes, the Lord's ledger, and the Lord's fist, all wrapped in a cloak of dyed wool that probably costs more than the entirety of your hut and its contents. He is not here to exchange pleasantries about the weather, though the weather is arguably the only thing the two of you share in equal measure. He is here to count. You keep your grip on the plow handles, your knuckles white. The rough wood digging into calluses that have formed over years of this exact posture. You stare at the mud. You stare at the rear hooves of his horse. They are shod in iron. Even the beast walks on metal, while you walk on calluses and rags. The horse is sleek, its coat brushed, likely fed oats this morning while you gnawed on that stone-hard rye. There is a bitter irony in realizing the animal looming over you has better job security and a higher caloric intake than you do. The bailiff clears his throat. It is a dry, dusty sound, devoid of humanity. It is the sound of a man who spends his life looking for deficits. He does not speak to you. Not really. He speaks at you. He mutters something about the week work. The mandatory labor you owe the Lord. You know the count. You know it in your bones. 3 days a week. 3 days of your life. Every single week are not your own. You wake up, you ache, you bleed, and you sweat. But the grain you coax from the earth on those days will never touch your lips. It travels up the hill to the manor, to storehouses you are forbidden to enter. He is checking your progress. He is calculating if you are slacking, if the furrow is straight enough, if the depth of the cut into the soil meets the Lord's standards. If it does not, the immersement, the fine will be levied, and you have no coin. You have only chickens, or perhaps a bag of barley hidden under the straw of your bed, or simply more labor to give. There is a rustling of parchment, or perhaps the clicking of wood. He is likely marking a tally stick. You can imagine it vividly, a split piece of willow or hazel, notched with a knife to record debts and payments. One half he keeps, the other half you might hold, if you were trusted with such things. The sound of a knife scratching against wood sends a shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with the damp cold. That sound is the sound of your life being bartered away. Every notch is a bushel of wheat you won't eat. Every scratch is a pig you'll have to slaughter for someone else's feast. You might think, in your modern sensibilities, that you own the land you stand on. You might have a vague notion of home, but here in the deep, quiet dark of history, ownership is a myth for people like you. You are a villain, a serf. You are tied to this mud as surely as the roots of the oak trees at the forest edge. If the land is sold, you are sold with it, effectively part of the inventory, listed somewhere between the plowshares and the oxen. You exist to make the land profitable. The bailiff's horse shifts again. Impatient. A large hoof squelches into a puddle, sending a spray of icy, muddy water across your tunic. You do not flinch. To flinch suggests you believe you deserve to stay dry. You simply accept the wetness as you accept the cold, as you accept the lice. It is just another layer of discomfort to ignore. He asks a question, his voice bored and imperious, about the drainage in the lower field. You mumble a reply, keeping your head bowed, your voice low. You strip your tone of any emotion, no anger, no sarcasm, no exhaustion. You try to sound like the mud itself, dull, reliable, and unthreatening. He doesn't actually care about your opinion on drainage. He only cares that the water doesn't rot the Lord's potential profit. The silence stretches out again. This is the psychological warfare of the feudal system. He waits, letting you stew in the anxiety of his presence. He is reminding you that your time is not yours. He can sit here on his horse for an hour, watching you breathe, and you must stand there and take it. He is stealing your daylight. Every minute he lingers is a minute the sun travels further across the sky. A minute of light lost that you needed to finish your own meager patch of land before the crushing darkness returns. You feel a cramp beginning in your lower back, a sharp, hot wire of pain tightening near your spine. Your legs, standing still in the freezing slurry, begin to go numb. But you hold the pose. The submission is a physical act. It is a performance of obedience that keeps the roof over your head. If you were to straighten up, to look him in the eye, to ask him to move so you could work, well, that is how men end up in the stocks. Or worse, ejected from the village to starve on the roads. Finally, with a grunt of dismissal that might be a goodbye or might just be indigestion, the bailiff snaps the reins. The horse turns, its massive body blocking out the weak sun for a final second, plunging you into a deeper, momentary twilight. The leather creaks, the hooves suck against the mud, and he rides off toward the next victim, the next neighbor who must be reminded of their debt. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. It comes out as a long, white plume of fog, dissipating instantly in the gray air. The tension drains from your shoulders, replaced immediately by the returning sensation of the heavy, wet cold. The shadow is gone, but the weight of it remains. You look at the tally stick in your mind's eye and the notches carved into your future. You grip the plow handles again. The wood is slick with your sweat and the ambient damp. You are alone again with the ox, the mud, and the silence. But the rhythm is broken. The dull trance of work has been shattered by the reminder of why you work. You aren't working to build something. You are working to pay for the right to exist. The futility of it washes over you, heavier than the rain that is threatening to fall from the slate-gray clouds above. Your throat feels incredibly dry. It's a scratchy, parched sensation that rises from your lungs. It's not just thirst, it's the dust of the chaff, the smoke of the hut, and the fear that just constricted your throat for the last 10 minutes. Your mouth tastes of copper and stale bread. You need something to wash away the taste of subservience. You need liquid, but you cannot simply cup your hands in the stream that runs by the field. You know better. That water is death. It carries the waste of the village, the runoff of the manure piles you shoveled this morning, the invisible sickness that takes children in the night. To drink water is to gamble with your life, and you have no chips left to wager. You look toward the edge of the field, where a leather flask sits propped against a stone, guarded by the crows. It contains the only thing safe to drink. It is not cold, it is not crisp, and it is certainly not refreshing in the way you dream of. It is brown, murky, and tepid, and you unhook the oxen, leaving them to stand with their heads low, mimicking your own posture. You trudge through the sucking mud toward the flask, your boots heavy as lead. You need to drink, but even the thought of what awaits you in that leather skin brings no joy, only a grim necessity. It is time for the daily dose of sour, fermented survival. You reach down to your belt, your fingers clumsy and stiff, fumbling for the leather strap that holds your costrol. It is a misshapen, bloated thing. This leather flask, stained dark with grease and the grime of 100 days in the field. It hangs heavy against your hip, a constant-eyed swaying weight that slaps against your thigh with every step you take behind the plow. But now, it is the only thing in the world that matters. Your throat feels like it has been stuffed with the very wool you are wearing. It is dry, coated in dust, and raw from the dry air and the exertion of breathing hard through your mouth. You unstopper the flask, pulling out the wooden plug with a wet, sucking pop. Immediately the smell hits you. It is not the clean, crisp scent of a mountain spring or the refreshing aroma of citrus. It is a heavy, yeasty odor, thick and pungent. It smells of fermentation, of damp grain, of something that has been sitting in a wooden vat in the corner of a dark hut for weeks. It smells like liquid bread that has begun to turn. It is the smell of ale. You lift the leather skin to your cracked lips, tilting your head back, and let the liquid slide into your mouth. It is tepid. Room temperature. Actually, but worse than room temperature, it has been warming against your body and baking in the weak sunlight all morning. It is soup warm. There is no shock of cold to wake you up, no bracing chill to shock your system into alertness. There is only this lukewarm, brownish fluid that fills your mouth with a texture that is unsettlingly thick. This is not the beer of the future. There are no hops here to give it that sharp, bitter bite that cuts through the thirst. Hops are a weed, a nuisance. They are not yet the staple of brewing. Instead, your drink is flavored with Groot, a mixture of herbs, bog myrtle, yarrow, maybe some rosemary if the alewife was feeling fancy, or perhaps just whatever weeds were growing near the brewing vat. It gives the liquid a medicinal, earthy taste, like drinking the forest floor after a storm. You swallow, and the liquid coats your throat rather than clearing it. It is gritty. The filtration process in your village is nothing more than straining the mash through a loose cloth or a bundle of straw. As you drink, you feel the sediment, the husks of grain, the sludge of yeast, sliding over your tongue. It requires a subconscious chewing motion to get it all down. You are practically eating your drink, and it is sour. There is a distinct vinegary edge to it, a sharpness that makes your jaw ache just slightly. The batch is turning, just like the last one. It is perilously close to becoming vinegar, but you drink it anyway. You drink it because you have no choice. You lower the flask, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand, leaving a streak of dirt across your face. You look toward the stream that runs along the edge of the Lord's field. It looks so inviting. The water there is clear, running over smooth gray stones. Reflecting the sky? It looks cold, it looks pure, but you know better. You know that further upstream, the tanner washes his hides in that water, turning it foul with lye and animal fat. You know the sheep stand in that water, relieving themselves as they drink. You know that the cesspits of the village seep into the ground that feeds that stream. To drink from the water is to invite the sickness of the gut, the fever that burns from the inside, the flux that drains a man of his strength until he is nothing but a husk in the straw. The water is death, the ale is life. It is a strange irony that the only thing safe to drink is something that dehydrates you further. This small beer, this weak ale, has been boiled. The heat of the fire has chased away the invisible demons that live in the river water. Though you do not understand the science of why, you only know the rule: drink the water and die. Drink the ale and live to work another day. So you take another swig of the warm, thick swill. It sits heavy in your stomach. Sloshing around with the crust of rye bread you ate earlier, it creates a sensation of fullness, a false satiety. It is calorie-dense, providing the energy your body screams for as you push the plow. But it does nothing to clear the fog in your head. In fact, it adds to it. The ale is weak. Yes, perhaps only 1 or 2% alcohol, but you have been drinking it since you woke up. You drank it with your breakfast. You are drinking it now. You will drink it with your pottage tonight. You exist in a perpetual, low-level haze. You are never truly drunk, but you are never truly clear-headed either. The edges of the world are always just a little bit soft, a little bit blurry, It numbs the ache in your lower back. It dulls the stinging of the blisters on your palms. It makes the monotony of the furrow just a little more bearable. You stare into the open neck of the leather bottle. A small fly buzzes around the opening, drawn to the sweet, sour scent. You wave it away sluggishly. This is your fuel. It is murky, flat, and warm. It leaves a sticky film on your teeth. It gives you gas that rumbles painfully in your gut as the yeast continues to work inside of you. But it is safe. You take one last long pull, draining the dregs. The grit at the bottom creates a paste in your mouth that you have to forcefully swallow. You grimace, the sour aftertaste lingering on your tongue. A reminder of the fermentation that rules your life. You stopper the flask, jamming the wooden plug back in tight, and hook it back onto your belt. The weight of it is gone, replaced by the weight in your belly. You feel a momentary heaviness, a desire to sit down in the mud and close your eyes, to let the mild alcohol lull you into a nap right here in the dirt. But the sun is moving. The bailiff is somewhere over the rise. The oxen are waiting, their tails flicking impatiently. You wipe your hands on your tunic, trying to dry them. But the wool is damp and greasy. There is no refreshment here, only maintenance. You have oiled the machine of your body with sour grain water so that it can continue to serve its purpose. You grab the handles of the plow once more. The wood is slick with your own sweat. You look up at the sky, hoping for a sign that the day is nearing its end, hoping to see the sun dipping low enough to justify the journey home. Instead, you see the color draining from the world. The gray clouds that had been hovering on the horizon all morning have suddenly surged forward, swallowing the weak light. The air pressure drops, pressing against your eardrums. The stillness that follows is heavy, charged with moisture. The taste of the sour ale in your mouth is suddenly replaced by the metallic tang of ozone. The oxen shift nervously, sensing the shift before you do. The wind dies down, and the birds stop singing. The respite of the drink is over, and the sky is about to open up. You barely have time to brace yourself against the wooden handles before the first heavy, freezing drop strikes your cheek like a stone. The sky doesn't just open, it seems to lower itself onto your shoulders. A heavy, this suffocating blanket of gray that erases the horizon. There is no thunder, no dramatic flash of lightning to signal a storm. There is only the sudden, crushing realization that the dry part of your day is over. That single drop on your cheek is followed by another, and then 1,000 more. A relentless curtain of water that sweeps across the furrows of the field like a marching army. You hunch your shoulders, an instinctual, feudal gesture to protect your neck. But the rain finds its way in. It always does. Within moments, the world narrows down to the few feet of mud directly in front of you, and the rhythmic drumming sound of water hitting the earth. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sensory experience of medieval rainwear. Or rather, the complete lack thereof. You are not wearing a waterproof jacket. You do not have rubber boots. You have wool. And while wool is a miraculous fiber in many ways capable of keeping you somewhat warm, even when wet, it has a terrible, undeniable flaw. It absorbs water. It drinks it up greedily. The rough tunic you pulled on this morning, which was already scratching your skin with its coarse fibers, now begins to transform. As the rain soaks into the weave, the fabric becomes heavy. It starts to sag, dragging down on your shoulders, pulling at your neck. It ceases to be a garment and becomes a burden, a sodden weight that you have to carry with every step. And then there is the smell. If you thought the air in the hut was pungent, the scent of wet, unwashed wool is something else entirely. It is the smell of a wet sheep, but magnified, mixed with the accumulated sweat and grime of weeks of labor. As the water permeates the layers, it reactivates the odors trapped in the fibers. The lanolin, the dirt, the smoke from the hearth, it all rises up in a damp, cloying cloud that clings to your face. The rain isn't the refreshing shower you might see in a movie, where the hero looks up to the sky and wipes his brow. This is cold rain. It is a biting, penetrating chill that seems to bypass your skin and settle directly into your bones. The water seeps through the outer tunic, then through the thinner linen undertunic, and finally, it hits your skin. It feels like icy fingers tracing the line of your spine, causing you to shudder involuntarily. The shivering starts almost immediately, a subtle, uncontrollable vibration in your core that makes your teeth chatter if you don't clench your jaw. But you cannot stop. To stop is to lose the rhythm of the oxen, to lose the daylight, to lose the favor of the bailiff who you know is somewhere nearby, watching from under the shelter of a thick cloak or a tree line. The plow must continue. The earth, which was resistant and rocky only an hour ago, undergoes a miserable alchemy. The dust and dry dirt mix with the deluge to form a slick, treacherous slurry. The field turns into a quagmire. Every step you take now requires twice the effort. Your leather boots, already worn thin and cracked, offer no resistance to the moisture. You feel the cold sludge seeping in through the seams, squelching between your toes. The mud here isn't just wet dirt, it is a living thing that wants to keep you. It creates a vacuum seal around your foot each time you plant it. You have to physically yank your leg up to take the next step, fighting the suction of the clay. Squelch, pull, step, squelch, pull, step. The rhythm slows. The oxen are suffering too. You can see the steam rising off their broad, wet backs, mingling with the falling rain. Their heads hang lower, their hooves slipping in the deepening muck. The wooden yoke, heavy enough when dry, is now waterlogged and dark, rubbing raw against their necks. You have to shout louder to be heard over the hiss of the rain, your voice cracking in the damp air, urging the miserable beasts forward when all they want to do and all you want to do is lie down and wait for it to end. But there is nowhere to go. This is a detail often skipped over in the romanticized versions of the past. There is no barn nearby to duck into. There are no trees large enough in the open strip fields to offer real shelter. And even if there were, you cannot leave the work. The field is vast, and the day is short. You are exposed, a tiny, solitary figure on a flat landscape, completely at the mercy of the elements. The rain plasters your hair to your skull. Water drips from the end of your nose, a constant, irritating tickle that you don't have a free hand to wipe away because your grip on the plow handles must be iron tight. The wood of the plow is slippery now. Your calloused hands struggle for purchase, sliding on the wet grain. The vibrations of the blade hitting rocks are duller now, muffled by the mud, but the jolts still travel up your arms, settling into your elbows and shoulders, which ache with a dull, throbbing persistence. You might wonder if you have any protection at all. Perhaps a hood. You pull the hood of your tunic up, but it is little more than a soggy flap of cloth. It quickly becomes soaked, drooping over your eyes, narrowing your vision until you are staring only at the muddy hindquarters of the oxen and the gray soup of the earth. The water drips from the rim of the hood directly down your neck, finding that one spot on your back that was still dry, sending a fresh shock of cold through your system. As the hours drag on, a strange numbness begins to set in. The shivering subsides, replaced by a heavy, lethargic cold. Your fingers, curled around the plow handles, look pale and waxy, the dirt washed out of the cracks in your skin, leaving them looking raw and red. You can barely feel the wood anymore. You are moving on autopilot, a machine made of flesh and bone, powered by the fear of starvation and the habit of survival. You look down at your tunic. The hem is caked in heavy mud, adding pounds to the weight you are dragging. The fabric chafes against your thighs, raw and red. Every movement is friction. Every movement is resistance. The wind picks up, blowing across the open field, turning the wet wool into a refrigerator coil against your body. This is how the ague starts, the sickness that the village elders whisper about. They say it comes from the bad air, the damp vapors of the earth. You don't know about vapors, but you know that this cold feels like it is curdling your blood. The horizon is a blur of gray mist. You can't tell where the sky ends and the land begins. It feels as though the entire world has dissolved into this wet, gray purgatory. There is no sun to mark the time. Only the fading of the light as the clouds thicken. You are trapped in an endless present moment of discomfort. You think about the fire back in your hut. You try to visualize the flames, the orange glow, the heat radiating out. But the image is distant, like a memory from another life. Right now, the reality is only the rain. It fills your ears. A constant white noise that drowns out your thoughts. It fills your nose. The smell of wet earth and wet animal. It fills your eyes and stinging and blurring your vision. The plow hits a deep patch of clay, and the oxen stumble. You slip, your knee crashing down into the freezing slurry. The mud soaks instantly through your britches, a shock of cold that steals the breath from your lungs. You scramble up, breathless, coated in slime. Your hands grappling for the slick handles. There is no dignity here. There is only the mud. You are soaked to the bone. It is a phrase you have heard 1,000 times, but now you understand the literal truth of it. It feels as though the marrow inside your skeleton has turned to ice water. The layers of wool, linen, and skin are no longer barriers. They are just conductors for the cold. You are part of the storm now. Just another wet, shivering object in a landscape of water and dirt. And as the rain continues to fall, relentless and indifferent, you feel a tickle deep in your chest. Not the water this time, but something internal, a tightness, a rattle. You try to suppress it, to swallow it down with the bile and the exhaustion, but the cold has taken root. A cough forces its way up your throat, ragged and wet, shaking your entire frame. It is a harsh, barking sound that is instantly swallowed by the wind and the rain. It hurts. A sharp, tearing pain behind your ribs. The dull ache of survival is shifting into something more acute. Something that warns you that this soaking is not just uncomfortable, it is dangerous. The spasm seizes you, sudden and violent, forcing you to double over the handle of the plow. It starts as a tickle deep in the scarred tissue of your lungs. A little flutter of irritation that you try to suppress. But the cold, damp air you have been inhaling all day has other ideas. The tickle expands, blooming into a jagged, tearing need that cannot be ignored. And you surrender to it. You cough. It is not a polite clearing of the throat. It is a wet, rattling convulsion that shakes your entire frame, rattling your teeth in your skull and squeezing the air from your chest until you are gasping, eyes watering, clutching the rough wood of the plow just to stay upright. You spit onto the muddy ground. The phlegm is thick and gray, speckled with the dust of the field and perhaps a worrying streak of pink. Though in the failing light, it is hard to tell, and perhaps it is better not to know. You wipe your mouth with the back of a hand that is caked in soil and manure, the grit scratching against your chapped lips. There is a metallic taste in your mouth now, the taste of copper and sickness, sitting heavily on your tongue where the flavor of the sour ale has long since faded. This cough is not new. It is an old friend, a constant companion that moved into your chest 3 winters ago and has simply refused to leave. In this life, in this time, health is not a default state. It is a fleeting luxury, a temporary reprieve between ailments. You are likely no more than 30 years old, yet your body feels ancient, weathered like an old fence post left out in the storms. If you were to look at a reflection of yourself, not that you have a mirror, the only reflection you see is in the murky water of the horse trough, you would see deep lines etched around your eyes and mouth. The map of 1,000 days spent squinting against the sun and grimacing against the cold. You straighten up slowly, feeling the vertebrae of your spine pop and grind against one another. There is a dull, throbbing ache in your lower back that never truly goes away. It merely fluctuates between a manageable hum and a blinding spike of agony. It is the price of the plow. But right now, the concern is the heat radiating from your chest, a feverish warmth that feels alien against the clammy chill of your soaked tunic. You know, in a vague, abstract way, that there are people who claim to heal such things. You have heard of physicians in the great cities, men in long robes who study the movement of the stars and the color of urine, holding glass flasks up to the light to divine the secrets of the body. But that world is as distant from you as the moon. Here, in the mud and the mist. Medicine is a mixture of folklore, desperate hope, and whatever weeds grow by the riverbank. Your hand drifts to the small, greasy pouch tied to your belt. Inside, there are a few dried leaves of sage and a lump of something that might be hardened resin, or perhaps just a colored stone that a traveling merchant sold you for a halfpenny. Promising it would ward off the bad air, you consider chewing on the sage, but the effort seems too great. The prevailing wisdom of your village, passed down in hushed tones by the old women who tend to the birthing beds and the deathbeds, is that sickness is an imbalance. Your humors are out of alignment. You have too much phlegm, or perhaps too much black bile. The dampness of the earth has seeped into your spirit. There is no concept of bacteria here, no knowledge of viruses. To you, this cough is not an infection. It is a curse or a punishment, or simply the inevitable result of the night air. The air itself is suspect. You have been taught that the night vapors carry disease, ghosts that slip down your throat while you sleep. It is a terrifying thought, that the very act of breathing could be your undoing. But it is a fear so constant that it has become boring. Just another background noise in the symphony of your survival. You take a shallow breath, testing the capacity of your lungs. They wheeze, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone. It hurts, a bruised sensation behind your ribs. But the fit has passed for now. You are left only with the fatigue. It is a heaviness that sits in your marrow, a lethargy that makes your limbs feel as though they are made of lead. Every movement requires a deliberate negotiation with your own body. You tell your arm to lift the reins. Your arm argues back, complaining of stiffness and soreness. You force your legs to take a step. Your knees protest with a sharp twinge of rheumatism that flares up whenever the rain falls. And the rain is always falling. Or so it seems. The dampness is the enemy of the peasant. It rots the grain. It rots the wood of your hut. And it rots you. You can feel it in your joints. A deep, gnawing ache that tells you the weather before the sky does. Your knuckles are swollen, misshapen things. Callus layered upon callus until the skin is as tough as cured leather. Yet underneath, the bones are fragile and aching. You look at your hands, gripping the plow handles, and you see the dirt deeply ingrained in the cracks of your skin. A permanent tattoo of your station in life. No amount of scrubbing with river water and sand will ever truly get them clean. The earth is part of you now. It's part of you. A memory drifts through your feverish haze of a time when you were a child, running through the summer grass, your chest clear, your legs tireless. It feels like a dream from another life. Now, survival is a dull endurance test. You do not expect to feel good. You only hope to feel capable. As long as you can stand, as long as you can walk behind the ox, you are alive. To stop is to die, and if you cannot work, you cannot pay the Lord's tax. If you cannot pay the tax, you lose the land. If you lose the land, you starve. The equation is brutal in its simplicity. So you ignore the heat rising in your forehead. You ignore the shivering that starts in your shoulders and ripples down your spine, making your teeth chatter for a moment. You clench your jaw, grinding your molars together, the ones you have left anyway. The toothache is another constant. A sharp, rhythmic pulsing in your jaw that syncs with the beating of your heart. Most of the people in the village have mouths full of rot. Sugar is a luxury you will never taste. But the coarse bread wears the enamel down to the nerves, and the gums recede in the face of malnutrition. You have learned to chew on the other side of your mouth, a small adaptation in a life defined by them. You nudge the ox forward. The beast is sluggish, its hide steaming in the cold air. Seemingly as miserable as you are, it, too, is suffering from the dull ache of existence, plodding forward not out of ambition, but out of habit. You feel a strange kinship with the animal. You are both beasts of burden, tethered to the soil, walking the same lines back and forth until you drop. The cough threatens to return, a tickle building in the back of your throat. You swallow it down, forcing a wad of saliva against the irritation. You don't have time to stop again. The light is changing. The gray sky is darkening to a bruised purple. The shadows of the trees at the edge of the field stretching out like long, grasping fingers. The wind is picking up, biting through your wet wool, chilling the sweat on your skin and making the fever feel sharper, more distinct. There is a profound loneliness in this physical suffering. No one else can feel the specific texture of your pain. You look across the fields, towards the distant shapes of other peasants working their strips of land. They are silent, hunched figures, silhouettes against the gloom. You know that they, too, are aching. They, too, are nursing coughs and tending to boils and ignoring the fire in their joints. But you do not speak of it. To complain is to waste breath, and breath is precious. You are trapped in the immediate sensation of your own body, the itch of the lice that have woken up with the heat of your fever, crawling sluggishly under your tunic, the squelch of your toes inside your boots, where the leather has given way to the mud, the raw, scraping feeling in your throat every time you inhale. It is a sensory overload of discomfort, a cacophony of small miseries that drown out any higher thoughts. You are not thinking about the king, or the war, or the nature of God. You are thinking about the next step, and the next. The plow hits another rock, the handle slamming into your hip. You don't even cry out. You just grunt, a low animal sound, and heave the wood back into the furrow. The pain is just another layer added to the pile. You are numb to it, in a way. The dull ache has become your baseline, the canvas upon which your life is painted. As the twilight deepens, blurring the edges of the world, the urgency of the work begins to fade, replaced by the crushing weight of exhaustion. The day is losing its battle against the night. The ox knows it, slowing its pace, lifting its head to sniff the air for the scent of the barn. You know it too. Your body is screaming for rest, for the brief oblivion of sleep, even if that sleep will be on a prickly straw mat in a smoke-filled room. You reach the end of the furrow. The turn feels harder this time, your arms trembling with a weakness that frightens you. You lean against the flank of the ox for a moment, borrowing its warmth, closing your eyes as the world spins slightly. The smell of the wet animal, usually pungent and overpowering, and now feels grounding. It smells of life. It smells of continuity. You push yourself upright. You are not done. Not yet. But the field is disappearing into the dark. The time for labor is ending. and the time for the long, painful trudge home is beginning. You unhook the plow, your fingers clumsy and stiff with cold, fumbling with the leather straps. The silence of the coming night wraps around you, heavy and indifferent, broken only by the sound of your own ragged breathing, the rattle of your chest marking time in the darkness. The rattle in your chest subsides into a dull, rhythmic wheeze as you straighten your back, or at least as much as your spine will allow. That momentary pause, that brief interlude where you simply stood still and breathed, is over. The sun, a pale and distant disk that offered precious little warmth today, has finally slipped beneath the jagged line of the forest to the west. The world is turning a bruised shade of purple, the color of a healing hematoma, and the temperature is dropping with a speed that feels personal, vindictive. It is time to go back. You might think that the end of the workday brings a sense of relief, a lightness of spirit knowing that labor is done. But here, in the year 1000, relief is a luxury you cannot afford. The cessation of work is simply the beginning of the commute. And just like the modern commutes, you might be dreaming of the stop-and-go traffic. The crowded subway cars, this journey is its own special brand of torture. But yours is not measured in miles per hour or train stops. Yours is measured in painful steps, in the squelch of mud, and in the encroaching fear of the dark. You reach down and grab the handle of your hoe, or perhaps the rope lead of the ox if you were lucky enough to be using one today. The ox is just as miserable as you are. Its head hangs low, steam rising from its flanks in the cooling air, a pungent cloud of animal sweat that mixes with the smell of the damp earth. You tug the rope. The beast groans, a low, vibratory sound that you feel in your own chest, and begins to plod forward. You follow. The first step is always the hardest. Your muscles have cooled down during that brief rest, and now they protest the movement. The lactic acid has settled into your thighs and calves, solidifying into a deep, burning ache. Your knees crack, a dry sound like snapping twigs, loud in the twilight quiet. You lift your foot, your boot heavy with caked mud clay that has dried and layered over itself throughout the day until your feet feel like they are encased in lead anchors. You place it down, watching the slurry ooze up around the leather, threatening to breach the seams and soak your socks once more. You keep your head down. It's a habit born of survival. Looking up at the horizon only reminds you of how far you still have to walk. The village is not right next to the fields. That would be too convenient. Too logical for the scattered, inefficient system of strip farming that dictates your life. Your strip of land, or rather, the Lord's strip of land that you are permitted to work, is likely miles from your hut. You have spent the day walking back and forth on this narrow ribbon of earth, and now you must traverse the wasteland between here and the hearth. The path back is barely a path at all. It is a rutted scar in the landscape, churned up by the passage of other peasants, other oxen, and the occasional horse of a bailiff or a knight who wouldn't deign to move aside for you. In the dimming light, the ruts become treacherous. They are filled with shadows that hide twisted roots and sharp stones. You have to walk with a peculiar, jarring gait, testing the ground with your toe before committing your weight. Because a twisted ankle out here isn't just an inconvenience. In a world without ice packs or orthopedics, a bad sprain means you can't work. If you can't work, you can't pay your tax. And if you can't pay your tax, you starve. Every step is a high-stakes gamble. As you trudge, the sensory world begins to shrink. The birds have stopped singing, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the unsettling rustle of unseen things in the hedgerows. The wind picks up, cutting through your sweat-dampened wool tunic. This is the most dangerous time for your health. You are overheated from exertion but rapidly cooling in the night air. You can feel the chill seeping into your bones, turning the dampness of your clothes into a clammy, icy second skin. You wrap your arms around yourself, rubbing your biceps with dirt-stained hands, but the friction provides no heat. There's a profound loneliness to this walk. You might pass a neighbor, a silhouette hunching along in the gloom, but you rarely speak. What is there to say? You both know the misery. You both know the hunger. To speak would be to waste precious breath. You simply nod. Two ghosts passing in the mist, united by the shared trauma of existence. You focus on the physical sensation of your body to distract yourself from the cold. Your hands are locked into claws, the shape of the plow handle permanently etched into your grip. Your shoulders scream with a sharp, stabbing pain where the muscles have knotted tight against the vertebrae. There is a dull throbbing at the base of your skull, the kind of dehydration headache that sits behind the eyes and makes the twilight blur. You are thirsty, terribly so, but you don't drink from the puddles you pass. Even you, with your limited understanding of the microscopic world, know that the standing water in the cart ruts is death. It is filled with the waste of the animals that walked here before you. So you swallow your dry spit, your throat clicking, and keep walking. The landscape around you changes as you draw closer to the settlement. The wild, tangled woods give way to clearer pastures, though in the dark, they all look gray and foreboding. You are entering the zone of civilization, but civilization in the Dark Ages smells distinct. It hits you before you see it. First, the smell of wood smoke. It hangs low in the air, trapped by the atmospheric pressure. It is a thick, acrid scent, not the cozy campfire smell of a modern vacation, but the heavy, industrial smog of 100 inefficient fires burning green wood and peat. It stings your eyes and catches in your throat, triggering that cough again. Then, the smell of animals. Not just the clean scent of hay, but the concentrated ammonia of pigsties, the wet dog smell of the hounds roaming the streets, and the accumulation of manure that is never quite fully cleared away. And finally, like the smell of humanity. Unwashed bodies, rotting garbage piles, the effluvia of life packed too closely together. To a modern nose, it would be retch-inducing. To you, it simply smells like home. It smells like safety. Because out there, behind you in the darkening fields and the encroaching forest, lies the true dark. The medieval night is not like the modern night. It is absolute. There is no light pollution to reflect off the clouds. When the sun goes down, the world is erased, and in that erasure, the old fears come alive. You walk a little faster now, ignoring the protest of your knees. You've heard the stories. Stories told in hushed tones around the fire of wolves that snatch stragglers. Of bandits who would slit your throat for your worn-out boots. And of things worse than wolves or bandits. Spirits of the wood. Demons of the crossroads. You are a superstitious creature, and not because you are foolish, but because you are vulnerable. You have no defenses against the night. The mud of the village track is different from the mud of the field. It is slimier, mixed with kitchen slops and waste thrown from doorways. Your boots slide unpredictably. You have to engage your core, tightening your stomach muscles just to stay upright, adding a final layer of exhaustion to your depleted frame. You see the shapes of the huts now, low mounds of shadow against the slightly lighter sky. They look like sleeping beasts. There are no windows glowing with warm, welcoming light. Candles are for the church and the manor. Rushlights are too precious to burn wastefully, and the fire is likely banked low to save wood. The village is a collection of dark humps, silent save for the occasional bark of a dog or the crying of a baby. You reach your own hut. It is indistinguishable from the others. A wattle-and-daub structure with a thatched roof that hangs low like a heavy brow. You stop at the door a simple hurdle of woven branches or a heavy leather flap. You pause, This is the threshold. Behind you is the brutal indifference of nature. Ahead of you is the stifling, smoky confinement of your domestic life. You take a breath, tasting the soot and the damp. Your body feels incredibly heavy, as if gravity is pulling harder on you than on anyone else. The adrenaline of the walk, the fear of the dark, fades, leaving only the crushing weight of fatigue. Your feet throb in time with your heartbeat. Your hands are stiff, frozen into hooks. You can feel the dirt grinding between your toes, the grit in your teeth, the sheer accumulation of the day coating you like a second skin. You don't have the energy to scrape the mud from your boots. That is a problem for tomorrow. You don't have the energy to think about the fact that you will have to do this walk again in mere hours. That is a horror for tomorrow. Right now, all you can do is push aside the door. The leather hinges creak, a sound of protest. You step over the threshold, bowing your head to avoid the low lintel, and drag your weary body out of the fresh air and into the thick, suffocating atmosphere of the indoors. The long walk is over, but the night, with its own discomforts and demands, is only just beginning. You let the flap fall shut behind you, sealing yourself in. The darkness of the hut is different from the darkness outside. It is warmer. Yes, but it is heavy with the scent of what awaits you next. The simmering pot, the smoke, the life you have returned to. You step fully inside, and the wooden door rattles shut behind you, sealing out the wind but locking you into a different kind of suffocation. The transition is instant and physical. You go from the biting, expansive cold of the open fields to a wall of heat that hits you with the solidity of a physical blow. But it is not just heat. It is a thick, opaque atmosphere that tastes of soot and unwashed bodies. The darkness here is granular. The only light comes from the central hearth, a pit of glowing embers and a few distinct, lazy flames that lick at the bottom of the iron cauldron. There is no chimney. There is only a hole in the thatch roof. High above, a hopeful gap that the smoke is supposed to find on its own. But the smoke, heavy and stubborn, seems to prefer the room. It hangs in a low, undulating cloud, a gray ceiling that hovers just above waist height. You know the drill. You instinctively hunch over. In this house, you live your life in the lower 4 feet of the air. To stand tall is to blind yourself, to plunge your head into the acrid, stinging smog that coats the rafters in shiniest black tar. You move toward the fire, your eyes already watering. This is the constant state of your evenings, a blurry, tear-filled haze. You rub your eyes with a knuckle that is caked in the dried mud of the field, leaving a streak of grime across your cheek. But it does no good. The smoke is part of you. It is in your clothes and in your hair and deep in your lungs. When you cough a dry, rattling bark, you are just joining the chorus of the rest of your household. You sink down onto a low wooden bench, the wood polished smooth and greasy by years of trousers sliding across it. Your knees crack, a sharp report in the quiet room, protesting the change in position after hours of walking. You extend your hands toward the fire. This is the moment you have been working for since the sun rose. The heat reaches out and touches your frozen skin. It is a complex sensation. It is relief. Yes, but it is also pain. As the blood begins to return to your extremities, your fingers start to tingle and burn. The chilblains on your knuckles itching with a ferocity that makes you want to scratch the skin off. But you don't. You just hold them there, watching the dirt under your fingernails turn stark and black in the orange glow of the embers. And then there is the smell. Underneath the overpowering scent of wood smoke and the ammonia tang of the animals just a few feet away, there is the smell of dinner. It is the smell of survival. It is the smell of pottage. Someone your wife, perhaps, or an elder daughter hands you a bowl. It is turned from ash wood, warped slightly from years of hot liquid and cold nights. The rim chipped and stained dark. It feels light in your hand, lighter than the tools you have wielded all day. Along with it comes a spoon, whittled from a branch, the bowl of it shallow and rough against your lip. You look down into the vessel. In the dim, flickering light, the contents are an indistinguishable shade of gray-green. This is pottage. It is the fuel of the peasantry, the alpha and the omega of your culinary life. It is not a recipe, it is a circumstance. It is whatever was available and boiled until it surrendered its identity. You lift a spoonful to your mouth. You do not blow on it. You want the heat. You need the heat to thaw you from the inside out. You take the first sip, and the flavor is familiar. It is the flavor of yesterday, and the day before that. It is the thick, starchy taste of field peas and broad beans that have been simmered until they have dissolved into a heavy paste. There is the sulfurous sweetness of onions, boiled down to nothing. There might be a hint of cabbage, limp and translucent. There is a texture to it that coats your tongue. A grittiness that might be dirt from the vegetables or just the nature of the grain used to thicken it. Occasionally, your teeth find something solid, a bean that refused to break down. Or perhaps a piece of gristle. If you are lucky, truly lucky, there is the taste of pork fat. Not meat, really, but the memory of meat, a rind of bacon or a bone thrown in to give the water a ghost of richness. But mostly as it tastes of salt and smoke. The smoke from the room settles into the pot, seasoning the food with the same carbon that lines your lungs. You eat rhythmically. There is no conversation. The energy required to speak is a luxury you cannot afford. And besides, there's nothing new to say. The plow broke. The bailiff is cruel. The rain is cold. Everyone knows this. These are the constants of the universe. So you eat in silence, and the only sounds the scraping of wood on wood, the wet sounds of chewing, and the popping of the firewood. You might think of this pot as a fresh meal, but that would be inaccurate. The pot on the hearth is an eternal thing. It is rarely emptied and scrubbed. Why would you waste the dregs? Why would you throw away the essence of the food? No. New water is added. New beans are tossed in. A handful of oats is scattered to thicken the broth. And the cycle continues. You are eating a meal that technically began weeks ago. A continuous lineage of sustenance simmering in iron. It is efficient. It is warm. It is boring. As you eat, you pull a piece of bread from your tunic. It is the rye bread from this morning, or perhaps from 2 days ago. It has the density of a brick. You cannot bite into it, your jaw is too tired, and your teeth are too precious to risk on such stone-like crust. So you use the bread as a tool. You break off a chunk and submerge it in the gray sludge of the pottage. You hold it there, watching the bubbles rise around it. Waiting. You count the seconds. You need the hot liquid to invade the bread, to soften the stale crumb, to turn the rock into a sponge. When you finally lift the sodden sop to your mouth, it is heavy and dripping. It falls apart on your tongue. A hot, mushy bolus of sour rye and bean juice. It fills the empty space in your stomach with a heavy, leaden weight. This is the goal. Not nutrition. Specifically, but fullness. You need to feel heavy. You need the food to weigh you down, to anchor you against the cold, to put you into the stupor necessary to sleep through the flea bites and the drafts. The heat from the fire is roasting your shins now, making the wool of your hose hot to the touch, while your back, facing the dark corners of the hut, remains chilled. You are a creature of two climates. You rotate slightly on the bench, trying to even out the temperature, but it is a losing battle. The draft from the door creeps along the dirt floor, winding around your ankles like a cold snake. You scrape the bottom of the bowl. The wood of the spoon catches on the rough grain of the bowl's interior. You scoop up the last of the thick residue, the darkest, saltiest part of the stew that has settled at the bottom. You lick the spoon clean. There is no waste here. You would lick the bowl if you had the energy, but instead, you set it down on the floor near the hearth. A dog. A skinny, mangy thing that belongs to the house as much as you do. Creeps forward from the shadows. You do not shoo it away. It licks the bowl for you, its rough tongue rasping against the wood, cleaning it more effectively than water ever could. This is the dishwasher of the Dark Ages. You lean back, your spine curving against the rough daub and wattle wall behind you. The meal sits heavy in your gut, a warm stone radiating heat outward. The smoke seems to lower itself further, pressing down on you, making your eyelids heavy. The sharp sting in your eyes dulls to a throbbing ache. The light in the room is dimming as the fire settles into a bed of red pulsing coals. You look around at the others in the hut. They are indistinct shapes in the gloom, huddled forms wrapping arms around knees, staring blankly into the embers. Faces are smudged with soot, eyes glassy with exhaustion. There is a communal intimacy here that is born of necessity, not affection. You share this air, this food, this warmth, because to be alone is to die. You listen to the breathing of the room. It is a slow, collective wheeze. The ale you drank earlier has worn off, leaving a dull headache behind your eyes, but the pottage is doing its work. It is pulling the blood from your brain to your stomach. Your thoughts, which raced with anxiety about the harvest and the taxes during the day, are slowing down. They are becoming thick and sluggish, like the stew itself. The urgency of the field fades and the fear of the bailiff recedes. There is only the immediate sensation of the fire, the itch of the wool, and the taste of rye lingering in your teeth. You stay there for a long time, in that twilight state between waking and sleeping, hypnotized by the dying light of the fire. You watch a single spark pop from a log and float upward, drifting lazily toward the smoke hole. A tiny, glowing star in a universe of soot. It fades before it reaches the roof. The silence of the hut is not true silence. It is a tapestry of small, scuttling noises. The rustle of straw, the shifting of the cow in the stalled section of the house, her heavy breath huffing in the dark, the scratch of a mouse in the thatch. But these are safe sounds. They are the sounds of the inside. You run your tongue over your teeth, feeling the grit. You swallow hard, trying to clear the coating of smoke from your throat. It is time. The day is finally, mercifully, done. The bowl is empty. The fire is fading. The heaviness in your limbs is no longer just fatigue. It is a command from your body that can no longer be ignored. You push yourself up from the bench, your joints protesting one last time, and turn away from the fading warmth of the hearth, toward the darker, colder corners where the straw awaits. The pottage has done its job. You are fueled for the night. You are ready to surrender. The surrender is not immediate. It is a process, a slow negotiation with the architecture of your misery. You move those few steps away from the fire, leaving the circle of light where the smoke is thickest, and retreat toward the walls. Here, the air is clearer, but it is also colder. The dampness of the earth seems to reach up, grabbing at your ankles, a chill that seeps through the thin leather of your boots even before you take them off. This is your bedroom. This is your sanctuary. This is a patch of dirt, perhaps 6 feet by 3, packed so hard by years of footsteps that it shines like polished stone in the dim light. But it is not stone. It is earth, ancient and unforgiving. A composite of clay, spilled ale, trodden straw, and the invisible history of every meal dropped and every muddy boot that has crossed the threshold. Lying upon this foundation is your bed. To call it a bed is to engage in a level of fantasy that you, in your exhaustion, simply cannot muster. It is a pallet, a sack. If you are lucky, sewn from coarse hemp or linen that has seen better decades, let alone better days. If you are less lucky, it is simply a pile. A heap of straw raked into a vaguely rectangular shape, held together by nothing more than gravity and hope. This is the ritual. You cannot simply collapse. If you dive onto the straw as it lies, you will wake firmly crippled. The straw has memory. It remembers exactly where your heavy hips dug in last night. It remembers the hollow where your shoulder pressed. Over the last 12 hours, the stalks have settled, compressed, and interlocked into a hard, unforgiving mold of your previous suffering. To sleep on it now would be like sleeping on a topographical map of your own pain. So, you must reset the clock. You must erase the memory of the straw. You lean down, your back groaning in protest. The muscles along your spine tight as bowstrings from the day's labor. You grab the corner of the pallet. The fabric is greasy to the touch, slick with the oils of human skin and the grime of the floor. You lift it. It is heavier than it looks, weighted down not by the straw itself, but by the moisture it has absorbed from the air and the floor. It holds the damp like a sponge. You give it a shake. This is a mistake. Of course, it is always a mistake. Yet you do it every night. A cloud of particulate matter explodes from the mattress. It is a visible puff of gray in the gloom. Dust. Pulverized chaff. Dried mud. The microscopic detritus of 100 nights. It billows up into your face, dry and choking, coating your tongue with the taste of old grass and enclosed spaces. You cough, a dry, hacking rattle that echoes in the small hut, answered perhaps by the rustle of a cow shifting its weight on the other side of the room. You drop the pallet back down. It lands with a dull thump, lacking any spring or bounce. It is dead weight. You kneel now, ignoring the way your knees crack, and you use your hands to knead the lump. You are trying to redistribute the filling, to break up the matted clumps of stalks that have fused together. You push and pull at the hemp sack, trying to create a center that is slightly thicker than the edges. A futile attempt to create a cradle for your weary body. The straw creates a sound as you work at a dry, brittle whispering. Crinkle. Snap. Rustle. It sounds like autumnal death. This straw was once golden and standing tall in the fields you worked. It was alive. Now it is just the crushed refuse of the harvest, destined to break down slowly beneath you until it is nothing more than dust. At which point it will be swept out to the midden heap and replaced with fresh stalks. You are sleeping on compost in the making. But the dust and the damp are not the only things living inside the pallet. As you fluff the straw, you disturb the tenants. They are small, but they are legion. The fleas. They have been waiting for you. During the day, while the hut is empty of human warmth, they are quiescent, lurking deep in the hollow stems of the straw or hiding in the crevices of the dirt floor. They wait in a state of suspended animation, tiny biological machines designed for patience. But now, they sense the vibration. They sense the carbon dioxide of your breath. They sense the heat radiating from your hands as you smooth out the burlap. You know they are there. You don't need to see them. In fact, you rarely see them. They are shadows within shadows. Specks of malice that vanish the moment you try to focus on them. But you know the feeling. You know the sudden, sharp prick that comes just as you are drifting off. You know the itch that travels, the sensation of something crawling, microscopic legs navigating the forest of hair on your arm or the back of your neck. Tonight, as you shake out the mat, you are essentially ringing the dinner bell. You are waking them up. You are agitating them, stirring them into a frenzy of anticipation. You smooth the pallet one last time. It looks lumpy. It looks miserable. It looks like the most inviting thing in the world because the alternative is standing up for one more minute. You sit on the edge of the mat. The straw crunches loudly, compressing instantly under your weight. So much for the fluffing. The buffer between your hip bone and the hard-packed earth is perhaps 2 inches thick. You can feel the cold of the ground radiating up through the straw, a distinct geological chill that seeks to drain the heat from your blood. You begin to unlace your boots. The leather is stiff, dried out from the mud and the subsequent drying by the fire. The laces are frayed cords that fight your clumsy, blistered fingers. You tug them loose and the boots slide off, revealing feet that are pale, callous, and unwashed. You do not take off your tunic. You do not take off your hose. You do not undress for bed. The concept of pajamas is a frantic absurdity that belongs to a soft, distant future. Here, clothing is armor. Clothing is warmth. Clothing is the only thing standing between your skin and the rough, scratchy texture of the hemp bedding. Besides, the layers help marginally against the fleas. You swing your legs onto the pallet. The rustling is deafening in the quiet hut. You lie back. There is no pillow. Perhaps you have a block of wood, or a tighter bundle of straw. Or perhaps you simply cradle your head on your arm, cutting off the circulation until your hand goes numb. You stare up into the darkness. The ceiling is low, a dark, heavy presence of thatch and timber, blackened by years of soot. You shift your weight, trying to find the valley in the straw you created earlier. A sharp end of a stalk pokes through the fabric, stabbing you right between the shoulder blades. You shift again. Another stalk pokes your thigh. The straw is a bed of nails made of grass. You wiggle, you twist, you grunt, trying to grind the sharp points down, trying to flatten the lumps, trying to find that one elusive position where the pain is distributed equally enough to be ignored. The smell is intense now that your face is pressed against the bedding. It smells of musty grain, of old sweat, of the dog that slept here during the day, of the earth itself. It is the smell of a life lived entirely at ground level. You lie still. You have to lie still. If you move, you disturb the cold air pockets you're trying to warm up with your body heat. You pull your knees up to your chest, curling into a tight ball, the universal posture of the freezing peasant. You are trying to make yourself small, to conserve every calorie of warmth the pottage provided. And then, the first bite comes. It starts at your ankle. A tiny, burning pinprick. Your leg twitches involuntarily. You rub your heel against your ankle, scratching the itch without using your hands, trying not to break your fetal tuck. Then, a sensation on your ribcage. A tickle. A crawler. You squeeze your eyes shut. You tell yourself it is just your imagination. You tell yourself it is just a stray hair. But you know better. The colony is active. The feast has begun, but you are so tired. You are so incredibly heavy. The ache in your shoulders from the plow, the throb in your hands, the sheer gravitational pull of the day's labor, it all weighs more than the discomfort. You are a landscape of dull pain, and the bites of the fleas are just sharp little landmarks on that map. You listen to the room. The fire is just embers now. The light is failing, the shadows stretching out and swallowing the corners of the hut. You can hear the heavy, rhythmic chewing of the ox on the other side of the partition. You can hear the wind picking up outside, like scratching against the thatch like a creature trying to get in. You have shaken the mat. You have braved the dust. You have settled into the dirt. The ritual is complete. The stage is set for the long, dark wait for morning. The straw beneath you stops crunching and settles into a silent, hard embrace. The cold begins to seep up, meeting the fading warmth of your body halfway. You watch the last flicker of orange light dance on a support beam, waiting for the inevitable moment when the hearth finally gives up the ghost. And then, it happens. That final, fragile ember, the one you had been staring at with a kind of desperate kinship, pulses once a weak, dying heartbeat of crimson, and then surrenders to the ash. The change is instant, and it is violent in its absolute quiet. In the modern world, the one you vaguely remember from a life involving electricity and light pollution, darkness is never truly dark. There is always the ambient glow of a street lamp filtering through blinds, the standby light of a television, the luminescent face of a clock. But here, in the year of our Lord, whichever year this forgotten stretch of misery happens to be darkness, is a physical weight. It is not just the absence of light, it is the presence of a suffocating, heavy ink that fills the room like water filling the lungs. You blink, but it makes no difference. Your eyes are open, wide and searching, but the input is identical to when they are shut tight. The room, the walls, the animals, the low ceiling, it has all vanished, erased from existence, leaving you suspended in a sensory void. For a moment, a wave of primal disorientation washes over you. Without visual reference points, the dimensions of the hut seem to distort. Is the wall 2 feet away? Or has the room expanded into an endless cavern? Is the ceiling still just inches above your head? Or has the sky opened up? You reach out a hand, your fingers trembling slightly in the cold air, and your knuckles brush the rough, splintery surface of the support beam. The tactile sensation grounds you. The world is still there. It is just invisible. And somehow, that makes it feel sharper, more hostile. Or, with the death of the light comes the death of the heat. It doesn't happen all at once, of course. The hearth, now a pile of graying dust and charred wood, radiates a ghostly, dying warmth for a few minutes. You can feel it on your cheek, a faint memory of the fire, but it is fighting a losing battle against the damp chill that seeps up through the earthen floor and pours in through the invisible cracks in the daub walls. The air grows heavy and still. And then the smell changes. While the fire was burning, the smoke had a direction. It rose, theoretically, toward the hole in the roof, carrying the worst of the particulate matter away, though plenty lingered to sting your eyes. Now, without the updraft of the heat to carry it, the smoke settles. It creates a stagnant layer that descends upon you. A cold, acrid smog that tastes of burnt peat and charred oak. You pull the scratchy wool blanket up over your nose, trying to filter the air. But the scent of soot is woven into the very fabric of the blanket. Into your hair, into your skin. There is no escaping it. You are breathing the ghosts of the day's fire, tasting the carbon in the back of your throat. You might wonder why you don't simply light a candle. It seems like such a simple solution. The kind of thing you'd see in a movie, a peasant lighting a thick beeswax candle to read a letter by. But that is a fantasy. Beeswax is for the church and the Lord's high table. It smells sweet and burns clean. And it costs more than you will earn in a month. If you had a light, it would be a rushlight, a piece of dried pith from a rush plant, dipped in bacon fat or rancid mutton grease. It would sputter, smell like frying garbage, and burn out in 20 minutes. Or perhaps a tallow candle, made of rendered animal fat that smokes and drips and stinks of the slaughterhouse. But even those are precious. You do not waste fat on banishing the dark when you could eat the fat to survive the winter. And so, you accept the blindness. You accept that when the sun goes down, your agency goes with it. It is in this absolute blackness that your hearing begins to sharpen, compensating for the uselessness of your eyes. And this, unfortunately, is the worst part of the night. During the day, The hut is a cacophony of your own, making the clatter of pots, the thud of the loom, the shouting of neighbors. But now, in the silence, the hut comes alive with the sounds of its other inhabitants. Above you, in the dense, tangled weave of the thatched roof, something moves. It starts as a faint rustle, dry and crisp, like dried leaves being crushed. Then, a scratching sound. Fast. Skittering. The thatch is thick. Layers upon layers of straw and reed added over the years, rotting at the bottom and fresh at the top. It is an insulator, keeping the heat in and the rain out, but it is also a sprawling metropolis for vermin. You lie perfectly still, holding your breath, listening to the distinct sound of tiny claws gripping the straw directly above your face. A rat. Maybe two. They are nocturnal. And for them, the extinguishing of your fire is the signal that the day has begun. You can hear them navigating the tunnels they have chewed through your roof. The sound is uncomfortably close, magnified by the silence and the dark. You imagine the creature matted fur, yellow teeth, carrying the fleas that will inevitably drop down onto your bedding. There is a sudden squeak, high-pitched and violent, followed by a flurry of thrashing in the straw, a territorial dispute, or perhaps a mating ritual. It is happening less than 3 feet from your nose, separated from you only by gravity and a bit of friction. You instinctively pull the blanket tighter, tucking your head in like a turtle, terrified that at any moment a tangled knot of fighting rats will lose their footing and plummet onto your chest. It isn't just the rats, though. The darkness amplifies every groan of the timber frame. The wood, cooling in the night air, contracts with sharp cracks that sound like pistol shots in the quiet. The wind picks up outside, whistling through the gaps in the eaves, causing the heavy ox hide hanging over the door to slap rhythmically against the jamb. And nearby, in the partitioned section of the hut, the livestock shift. You hear the heavy, wet exhale of the ox, the shifting of a hoof in the muck, the rhythmic chewing of cud. In a way, the sound of the animals is comforting. It is a reminder of wealth, of survival. Their large bodies act as living radiators, contributing a crucial few degrees of warmth to the room. But in the dark, the sounds are wet and guttural. You hear the slosh of digestion, the sudden splatter of manure hitting the floor. The smell of the animals drifts over the low partition, mixing with the cold smoke a cocktail of ammonia, wet fur, and ash. This is your world now. You are trapped in a box of sensory deprivation, shivering under a layer of raw wool, listening to the unseen scurrying of creatures that want to eat your grain supply. You shift on the pallet, the straw beneath you crunching loudly, sounding like an explosion to your sensitive ears. Your hip bone digs into the hard-packed earth through the thin mattress. You try to find a hollow for your shoulder, a position that relieves the ache in your back from the day's labor, but the floor is unforgiving. There is a profound boredom in this darkness. A modern mind, used to constant stimulation, would panic here. There is nothing to look at, nothing to read, nothing to distract. You are left entirely alone with your own thoughts. And in the Dark Ages, your thoughts are rarely pleasant companions. You lie there and calculate how much rye is left in the storage jar. You wonder if the cough in your chest is just a cold, or the beginning of the consumption that took your neighbor last winter. You wonder if the Lord will demand extra labor next week to repair the mill. The darkness forces you to confront the fragility of your existence. Without the fire, you are just a soft, shivering thing in a world of hard edges and predators. You feel small. You feel finite. The cold begins to settle deeper now, bypassing the wool and seeping into your joints. It is a numbing, dull ache that starts in your toes and works its way up. You curl tighter into a ball, knees to chest, trying to preserve the core heat of your body. The air in the room is stale, recycled by your own lungs and the lungs of the ox. You close your eyes again, though the view does not change. You focus on the sound of the wind outside, trying to tune out the scratching of the rats in the thatch. You try to synchronize your breathing with the slow, heavy breaths of the livestock. In and out. In and out. The darkness is heavy, pressing down on your eyelids, pressing down on your chest. It is a lonely, dirty, freezing existence. But the sheer exhaustion of the day is a powerful anesthetic. The scuttling above your head fades into the background, becoming a rhythmic white noise. The cold becomes less of a sharp bite and more of a heavy blanket. The worry about the grain and the tax collector begins to blur, losing its edges, dissolving into the nonsensical logic of the approaching drift. The absolute blackness, once terrifying, now begins to feel like a shroud, wrapping you up, preparing to drag you down into the only escape available to you. And that escape is not a luxury. It is a biological mandate. Your body, currently a collection of aching joints and bruised muscles, has ceased to ask for rest and is now demanding it with the force of a heavy, wet blanket thrown over a small fire. You don't simply decide to sleep, you surrender to it, striking a plea bargain with your own consciousness to just shut it all down for a few hours. You shift your weight on the pallet, a movement that creates a chorus of dry, rustling noises beneath you. Let's take a moment to appreciate the architecture of your bed. It isn't a mattress in any sense that a modern chiropractor would recognize. It is a sack of coarse burlap stuffed with straw that hasn't been changed since the last harvest. Over the months, the straw has broken down into a fine, dusty chaff that compresses into hard lumps under your hips and shoulders. Every time you move, a puff of microscopic dust rises up, joining the stagnant cloud of smoke that hovers near the ceiling. You try to find a hollow in the lumpy terrain of the mattress, digging your hip into a spot that feels slightly less like a bag of rocks than the rest. You pull the woolen blanket up to your chin. It's heavy, scratchy, and retains the distinct oily smell of the sheep it came from, mingled with the scent of unwashed humanity. But it captures your body heat, and for the first time in 16 hours, the shivering stops. A dull, prickly warmth begins to spread through your extremities, a sensation that is almost painful as the blood returns to your frozen toes. Beside you, the darkness is alive with the sounds of your family. In the Dark Ages, privacy is a concept that simply does not exist. It isn't just that you can't afford it, you wouldn't want it. Heat is life. You are packed onto this pallet like sardines in a tin, limbs tangled together in a confused heap of survival. You can feel the rhythmic rise and fall of your spouse's back against yours, the shallow, whistling breath of a child near your feet. Someone coughs a wet, rattling sound that hangs in the silence and then settles back into a heavy snore. It's a symphony of respiratory distress, but to your ears, it is just the white noise of existence. You close your eyes, but the sensory input doesn't stop immediately. The air in the hut is thick, almost chewable. With the door barred and the window shuttered tight against the poisonous night air, because you firmly believe that the cool night breeze carries sickness and death, the atmosphere inside becomes a concentrated stew of carbon dioxide, wood smoke, and the earthy, ammonia-rich scent of the animals. And don't forget the animals. They are your roommates, after all. Just beyond the invisible line that separates the living area from the stable end of the longhouse, you hear the heavy shifting of the ox. It blows air through its nostrils. A long, low huff that vibrates through the dirt floor. A hoof strikes the ground with a dull thud. The cow chews its cud. A wet, rhythmic, grinding sound that is oddly hypnotic. In a modern world, sleeping 10 feet away from a 1,000-pound farm animal would be a cause for alarm, a sign of chaos. Here, It is the sound of security. If the animals are inside, they aren't being stolen, and they aren't freezing to death. Their body heat is the central heating system of your home. You breathe in the scent of their manure, and it smells like money. It smells like survival. Your brain begins to untangle the knots of the day, but not in a philosophical way. You don't have the calorie count to waste on existential dread. You don't lie there wondering about your legacy or the meaning of the stars. Your thoughts are fragmented, flashing images of the mundane terror you just lived through. The feel of the icy mud sucking at your boots. The vibration of the plow hitting a rock. The way the bailiff looked at your grain sacks with hungry, calculating eyes. There is a throbbing ache in your lower back that pulses in time with your heartbeat. Your hands, curled into permanent claws from gripping the plow handles, refuse to fully flatten out. The blisters on your palms sting against the rough wool of the blanket. But even these sensations are beginning to fade, pushed into the background by the overwhelming, crushing weight of fatigue. It's interesting to note that you probably won't sleep through the night in one solid block. History is full of strange rhythms, and sleep is no exception. In this era, it is common to have a first sleep and a second sleep. You might wake up in 4 hours, entirely alert. You might lie there in the pitch black, listening to the wind howl through the thatched roof, or perhaps quietly murmur a prayer, or check the embers of the fire to ensure they haven't died completely. This gap in the night isn't insomnia, it's just how things are. But right now, that interval feels a lifetime away. Right now, there is only the descent. The darkness of the hut is absolute. There are no streetlights bleeding through the cracks. No standby LEDs from a television glowing in the corner. No ambient glow of a city reflecting off the clouds. When the fire dies down to red coal, the blackness is so complete it feels heavy, pressing against your eyelids. It is a sensory deprivation tank built of mud and wattle. In this void, your hearing becomes the only sense that matters. You hear the scratching of tiny claws in the thatch above your head. Rats. Or mice. They are running their own nocturnal marathon within the straw roof, hunting for the stray grains you might have missed. Occasionally, a piece of straw drifts down from the ceiling and lands on your face. You don't even brush it away. You are too heavy. You are sinking into the dirt floor, anchoring yourself to the earth that you spend all day fighting against. The cough in your chest tickles, urging you to hack and clear your lungs, but you suppress it. The energy required to cough seems like too much to spend. You let the smoke settle in your bronchioles. You let the itch of the lice, which are certainly active now, sensing the warmth of your stillness, become a distant, manageable annoyance. You are becoming an object. You are no longer a farmer, a serf, a peasant, or a parent. You are just a warm, breathing lump of matter waiting for the sun to recharge you. There is no anxiety about tomorrow, because tomorrow will be exactly the same as today. There is a terrifying comfort in that monotony. You don't have to plan. You don't have to strategize career moves or worry about the stock market. You just have to wake up and do it again. The inevitability of the grind acts as a sedative. The oxen will need to be yoked. The field will need to be turned. The hunger will need to be managed. But that is a problem for the version of you that exists in the light. The version of you in the dark is allowed to cease existing for a while. Your breathing slows. The racing thoughts of the harvest and the taxes dissolve into nonsensical shapes. The sound of the wind outside becomes a hum. The smell of the smoke becomes sweet. The pain in your joints dulls to a hum. You drift past the point of discomfort, past the point of hunger, falling deeper into the gray, dreamless void that is the peasant's only true possession. You are gone, and 6 hours from now, before the sun has even breached the horizon, the rooster will scream, and the wheel of suffering will begin its turn once more. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and central heating, maybe say a quiet thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors who fought the mud, the cold, and the crushing labor so you wouldn't have to. The silence of your bedroom is a luxury bought with their exhaustion. This has been the boring reality of history, where the drama isn't in the battles, but in the endurance. Sweet dreams.